The Accsoon F-C01 is an affordable wireless follow-focus system with a range of up to 100 meters. The system is easy to set up and doesn't require any expert knowledge. I would even go as far and say that it's idiot-proof, since after turning the devices on, only the motor needs to be calibrated by pressing one button, and then the system can already be used. The F-C01 can be used with pretty much any type of photo or video lens, but the best results can be achieved with a cine lens like this one, and there are two reasons for that. First off, these types of lenses usually have a much longer focus throw, which means it takes much longer to go from macro to infinity, which is a good thing unless you're pulling with hand. And the second reason are these gear rings, these teeth which are connected with a motor, and this way it's much better and much safer to pull focus because there is a connection, there is a grip. The F-C01 also comes with a 0.8 mod gear ring for lenses who don't have gear teeth and can be mounted quickly. Both devices have OLED screens that display information such as connectivity strength, the progress of the focus pull in %, and battery life. The first thing that needs to be done before being able to properly use this system is the calibration. This means the focus motor will automatically turn the lens to each end of the focus and save these parameters. Then the controller can be used to pull focus already. Just be aware that it can make sense to manually set these parameters with certain lenses, because not every lens has accurate markings. For example, infinity isn't always at the very end, but slightly before. The reason to do this is also that the screen of the controller doesn't show the distance in meter or feet, but rather in %, since it doesn't have that information. Focus pulls can also be programmed by setting an A and B point. The motor will then only turn as far as previously programmed. The speed of the focus pull between these points depends on how fast the wheel on the controller is being turned. The focus wheel can be set to clockwise or counterclockwise, but needs new calibration after doing so. The motor can also be connected with a camera via USB-C to trigger the start and stop of a recording via the controller that has a dedicated red button. Useful is also that the motor and controller can be connected via USB-C in case the controller is mounted directly onto the camera rig. Depending on how the controller is being held or mounted, the screen can be upside down. Unfortunately, there is currently no option to flip the info on the screen. While this is not a big deal, since most focus puller will rather look at the scene than the info screen, it would still be a good option to have. The build quality of the motor is surprisingly good. It doesn't feel cheap at all, especially when considering the price. Very well built. But the controller could still need some improvements. I think overall it's a little too lightweight, feels a little plasticky. The wheel is made from some sort of aluminium, but very lightweight. And I think it could also need a tiny bit more friction. Not much, just a tiny bit. But other than that, it's very well done. The controller is powered with one Sony NP-F W50 battery that has a dedicated battery compartment. One battery lasts for about half a day of shooting at average. The motor can be powered via USB-C and automatically disconnects once the controller is turned off. Like with any wireless systems, the range is of course one of the most important factors, and Accsoon claims a range of up to 100 meters. In a clear line of sight, outdoors we got up to 90 meters with some trees in the way, but let's face it, it's pretty much impossible to find a location without any obstruction or interference these days. And of course indoors the range is much shorter, between 30 and 70 meters if you're lucky, but this really comes down to the location, to the building, to the interference. So it's really hard to test this indoors because every building and every shooting scenario is different. The latency is very low, which is of course important when using a wireless system. According to the manufacturer, the latency is 10 milliseconds. How accurate the focus pulling is going to be in real time without any delays also comes down to how the person who is pulling focus watches the scene. When using a wireless video feed, the delay is probably going to be 50 milliseconds or more, so that's something to be aware of. All in all, the F-C01 is a pretty impressive low-budget system that does exactly what it's supposed to do without any issues. Of course, there are some minor things that could be improved, for example, the build quality of the controller and the quick release system, and also with the software that the screen can be flipped simply if you turn it in the other hand or by a push of the button. But other than that, it's a pretty good tool.